Session for Thursday, August 18th, 2022 is in session. Mr. Perkins, will you do the invocation for us, please?
Sure. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we're grateful for your divine grace that gives us life, your divine grace that gives us health and strength, for your grace, Lord, that gives us the opportunity to serve as you served. We just simply ask, O Lord, for your wisdom, your guidance, your direction as we move through these proceedings. Help us, Lord, to make decisions that are right for our students, our community, our teachers. Guide and direct us, O Lord, as we function in these positions to glorify and honor your name. Thank you, Lord, for your grace towards each one of us. And we just ask for your presence in this place today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I recommend approval of the agenda dated Thursday, August 18th, 2022.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and second for the recommendation for approval of the agenda dated Thursday, August 18th, 2022. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend approval of the minutes dated July 21st and 29th, 2022, and August 2nd, 2022.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and second for the recommendation for approval of minutes dated July 21st and 29th, 2022, and August 2nd, 2022. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have a request to address the board. Is Ms. Wood here? Okay. Well, we will just another minute. Okay.
Informational items. Item A, Desegregation Advisory Committee, application forms and processes. Dr. Ballard?
As you're aware, our updated negotiated desegregation consent order was signed by our district judge on July 5th, 2022, and we are moving forward with that process. This evening, I just want to provide a brief overview of our next steps, and one of that is to establish the Desegregation Advisory Committee. And this advisory committee will represent a regional cross-sectional of our district to include representing a racial and socioeconomic section of our district. This group, this Desegregation Advisory Committee, will advise the superintendent and seek input on the implementation of the terms of our consent order. Applications for this inaugural Desegregation Advisory Committee, or what is short-term DAC, will be due on September 15th, 2022. Committee members must be at least one parent and one parent representative, and one student from the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee representing all 5 of our family feeder patterns across our district. Applicants may apply for 1- or 2-year terms. At least 2 times per year, the meeting will be open to the public here at the district facility, here at the Board of Education, here in the auditorium. The DAC will meet, this committee will meet to review data and other information concerning the implementation of our consent order. The DAC will meet with the superintendent or his designee at least 2 times per year to discuss their findings and of data, of the review of their data, and provide recommendations. This committee will also create multiple means of receiving feedback from stakeholders across our community. And in our order, there is recommendations of how the DAC can receive feedback. They will have their own email address as well as a physical mailing address. And at each school, there will be a locked drop box for family members or stakeholders to provide input to this committee. And also, they will collect information from the Board of Education, from us here at Central Office, And that information, of course, will be secure. We will ensure that FERPA regulations are being upheld and privacy laws as they request information to complete what is required by our consent order. And that is by May 1st of each year that they will prepare, this committee will prepare an annual report regarding the assessments of the district's compliance with the desegregation obligations. And also the DAC will submit the report to the superintendent and all of the appropriate parties, which include you as well. And so we're looking to open this application in your board packet this evening. You have a copy of the letter to parents explaining the purpose of this committee, as well as the application for parents who are interested in applying, as well as for students who are part of the superintendent student advisory, those students who are interested also in applying to be a part of this committee. So that is a brief overview of the responsibilities of this committee and how we plan to potentially move forward per your approval of it, of sharing this information with parents and, of course, to the superintendent's student advisory committee. Are there any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ballard.
Federal Programs, Resource Specialist, Job Description, Ms. Bass?
So I think you have a copy of the proposal that I've written up in the proposed job description for this position. I'm not sure how much you all have background knowledge on how federal funding comes in and how it works, but basically we receive an allocation from the federal and it has guidelines for what it can be spent for and what it can't be spent for, and they're pretty specific. And so when those funds come in under any umbrella, we have to decide how do we meet the needs that are allowable and what are the needs of our district at this time. So with Title I money, when it comes in, there's a percentage that comes off for administrative purposes, and it has a capped amount. And then the remainder of that money is allocated in either off the top set asides or it's per pupil allocated out to the schools. And my goal is always to per pupil out the maximum amount unless there is something that we can do with the district initiative that will impact all the schools in a way that benefits the children. So this year we received an increase in funding over $300,000. And all of our schools, you know, when I met with them, they have their needs met largely with the per pupil allocation that they've had. So they're all getting another additional increase this year. But when I was looking at the administrative increase that we were going to receive, I wanted to think of ways that it could be used to benefit the students in our district, and to make sure that we're providing the best wraparound services for all of our at-risk populations of students. And one area that came up often with the Title I schools was parent and community engagement in their areas. As you know, if they're designated Title I, they have a high poverty above the district's average, and we serve the schools that have 40% or higher free and reduced lunch. So with those communities come challenges that some other communities may not face, which is what that Title I funding is for, leveling the playing field. But one of the things that the principals of Title I schools always say is getting parents engaged in the school is difficult. And so that was one area that I really felt like maybe there's more that we could do to support that process in the schools. After looking at district-wide areas that are growing, groups of children that are growing, homeless has become a place where we're seeing growth in that population of students. Now, it takes us a bit of time at the beginning of the year to calculate who's homeless because there's a little bit of research that goes into it. But at the end of the year, 238 students were identified as homeless. So with homeless, there are laws that say we have to provide certain services for those families. And although we've been providing services for those families, there's much more wraparound services that can be done. So after talking with Mr. Solly, Ms. Witt, the principals, I proposed this plan to create a position out of the admin budget increase that I would receive to offer more wraparound services for our homeless student population and to provide better parent and family engagement support to our Title I schools. So the position that I'm proposing is a resource specialist position, 222 days, fully funded out of federal funds, no funds coming from schools that they would not receive to be able to do the things that they want to do. But with those federal regulations, there is a amount cap of what you can carry over each year. And so we need to make sure that we have good plans in place for how we're going to use the funds we're allocated. And I feel confident that this $100,000 that I estimate should go to this position will provide better wraparound services for our homeless families. It'll have someone who is able to focus on that. But I also anticipate better support for parent and community engagement in our Title I school areas. The vision for that job is that that person will be able to provide parenting classes, curriculum and instruction nights, go out and meet with families that are struggling, provide support to the school in communication and outreach, but also to make sure that we're able to direct services to our families who need them. As you know, we have social workers and they do a phenomenal job, but this will be one person who's in one place that can really focus on making those connections, connecting with the social workers so that the social workers aren't having to do all the legwork. This person will be able to do some of that so that they're better able to be in their schools. So any questions?
How do you expect the 100,000 or 300,000, whatever it is, to continue? Or was this to continue year after year?
Yes, so that's a great question. We've had really good level funding for many, many years in Title I allocations, and we've had 2 major increases since I've been in this position in the last 5 years. And from everything that I'm told from the federal administrators group that I'm a part of, they do not see Title I funding going away. One of the conversations nationally is that we know that those at-risk and protected populations of kids have been more adversely affected by the pandemic. So I do not foresee that there would be a cut there. But we had extra money in our administrative budget that each year I knew wasn't getting spent, but it was being carried over and then per pupil allocated out to the schools the next season. So every, January when Mrs. O'Bannon presents the budget, there's a carryover section for Title I. A large chunk of that has been coming out of the admin budget. It's just there, it goes to the schools. So I feel like even if something happened where we had a decrease in that funding, there was money there that could have supported the position. Additionally, with homeless, there's a competitive grant called McKinney-Vento that we're allowed to write for each year. And it is allowable for the homeless portion of this position to be picked up by that grant. And once you receive funding in those grants, it's very consistent that you continue to receive that funding unless you just don't fill out your application. So I feel like the fund source is going to be stable.
Under the parent engagement duties, there's a coordinate with Title
Can you speak up, Ms. Bates? I can't hear. The air conditioner is loud.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Walk over here. It's not. I'm
Okay.
just kidding. There's a thing under here about the two parent engagement activities, would that funding come out of Title I as well as their, okay.
Yeah, and so that's part of that budget I built in, because there's a portion of that budget, obviously, that's salary for the person. But in that estimate that I've given, I looked at what parent involvement materials and supplies might cost. I've looked at what travel and professional development for that person might need, and all of that will be built into that budget.
Okay.
So, yes, and each school has a required amount of money that they have to spend, each Title I school, on parent and family engagement each year. And sometimes when you don't have anybody who can just lead that work, it's hard to figure out how to spend those funds.
Yeah.
And so I really do actually think this will be beneficial for the schools, because if they tell this person, hey, we're really struggling in mathematics data, and we would love a curriculum night on mathematics, but our teachers have a lot going on. So this person could go in, provide that, and they could use their school allocation for parent involvement to purchase materials and supplies.
Okay.
So their budgets are very healthy for what they're able to do, and obviously they're customized to each school. But I feel like this will give them a partner in helping to solve those problems, and to make the money that they do spend more valuable in their community.
I think I just have a comment. I think it's a great use of resources, a great job that somebody can do. We have similar roles like this in our Head Start programs. They're called Family and Community Engagement Specialists. So they do very similar duties, not the McKinney-Vento stuff, but similar. And I think it's a great resource for our schools. So, yeah.
I might want to pick your brain a bit about the role that you have there and how it's used, because obviously this will be a new role for the district in that parent and family engagement capacity. I have lots of ideas for it, but I would love to see how it's already currently working with organizations. And I have reached out to federal program directors in other districts who have a similar position and said, how do you use it? What does it look like? So I have plans. The biggest key is going to be finding the right person.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so that's why you'll see on that job description, we said, or,
Right, right.
or, because I really kept talking to them about not wanting to get boxed into a corner of only one degree or only one kind of expertise, because you don't know what the candidate pool will look like. And I wanted to have every opportunity to bring the very best person into the role, because those families really deserve it. We know those McKinney-Vento families struggle. Every day is a struggle for everything. And so if we can do some things to wrap around services for them, I think it's going to be a great option.
Very good. Any more questions for Ms. Bass? Thank you very much.
Administrative items. Item A, I recommend approval of the June 2022 financial statements and payment of bills as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of the June 2022 financial statement and payment of bills as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item B, I recommend approval of the Board Policy 6.29 Mental Health Opt-in as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of Board Policy 6.29 Mental Health Opt-in as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item C, I recommend approval of the Board Mental Health Opt-in Code of Conduct revisions as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of Board Mental Health Opt-in Code of Conduct revisions as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item D, I recommend approval of the Instructional Department Organizational Chart as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of the Instructional Department Organizational Chart as submitted. Any discussion?
Can you you go over the changes?
Mr. Kippick, you want to go over the changes?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So what this is where we had those 2 extra positions, one in testing and one as a resource specialist that had been removed. And we've extended 3 positions from 212s to 222, 202 to 220 2-day contracts, and one from a 222 to 240. And this aligns so that our instructional department has one person that's the supervisor for elementary, one supervisor for the middle schools, and one supervisor for the high schools, which are directly under Mr. Solly. As far as the federal program side, the only difference there is a caveat on there that if you decide to go forward with the homeless provision, that the homeless job description Ms. Bass was talking about, that we put that bubble in there so that could either be added or deleted, whether you guys decide to go forward with the homeless position, because that would be under Ms. Bass. So that's in there. As far as the special ed department, that all remains the same. So it's thinning out some of the instructional department by positions, but it's also adding linearness and direction as far as their pure contacts for where the schools will know who to go to for specific information, being elementary, middle, or high school.
So what exactly was taken out and the only thing added right now is the homeless? Is that what it is?
Correct. The homeless position that would be a new position that we're talking about that Ms. Bass informed.
It's not there yet, it's
It
just
is
you
not
put the
there.
bubble there,
That's
like you
right.
said, in case
Just
we
in
go
case,
forward.
in case you guys approved it, so we didn't have to bring back that to change it. What was taken out was, we had 2 people that were doing testing, and one of those went to she left education and went to a sales position for a company. And so we did not fill that position, which was a 202 testing position. And then we had a teacher resource position in there that was also a 222. And that employee decided to go back to the schools and wanted to work back in the schools. So instead of filling those positions, we restructured 3 different contract lengths. We added 10 days to 2 of them and 18 days to another. And then we realigned it so that we had a sole supervisor, for elementary, a sole supervisor for middle, and a sole supervisor for high schools. So when you're looking at the organizational chart, you'll see that on the left-hand side there, that you'll see the elementary, middle, and high. And then those other 4 blocks, they support everything from K-12 up. And then, of course, you have the federal programs part in the middle and the special ed to the far right. So the only new position that we didn't talk about before was homeless, because when we discussed the org chart, we didn't have homeless as part of that at that time. And that's solely if you agree to go forward with the homeless position, we'll put it there. If you decide that we don't want to go forward with the homeless position, then that will be eliminated. But this is definitely for clarity and so that our schools know exactly where they're going for the information, as far as making it linear as far as elementary, middle, and high.
Any more questions for Ms. Cubitt? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item E, I recommend approval of the athletic administrator job description as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation of approval of the athletic administrator job description. Any discussion?
Did y'all consider putting in, like, half of the duties are textbook, so there's nothing about that in the title, or the title? Did you consider?
It wouldn't need it in a title if it's in the job description. It's just that they would actually, because their actual job is to be the athletic administrator. But then their duties and responsibility under that title falls into that job description category. So we didn't really have to put it in there. It doesn't have to be in the title, the job description.
Right, it just seems odd that it's not. That
It-
says
that's-
half of their duty.
There's a lot of job descriptions that usually don't have, there's a lot of titles that don't necessarily have all the connections of job descriptions in there. And so with this, we just didn't have to put it in there.
Any more discussions, comments about the athletic administrator job description? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item F, I recommend approval of the Assembly Board Management Software contract as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of the Assembly Board Management Software contract as submitted. Any discussion? I'll just say a couple things. We'll send an email to you all. Cindy, you may want to comment as well. We had a ADA compliance issue with board policy. Is that correct?
With the Office of Civil Rights all over the country, there were complaints filed all over the country about governmental websites.
Okay.
And what they wanted was your board policy to be able to be linked through your website so that you could click on the index and it would take you straight to the policy. So that's where all this discussion started.
Yeah, so that's what was the beginning of the Assembly conversation. I sat into a meeting as well, and I liked the product that we saw as a one-stop shop for all board policies, procedures. Go back and see historical data of board minutes, search on minutes. You can see what was said, who said it, instead of having to sift through emails, sort through emails. For the cost, it was relatively inexpensive for our district, and we're not going with the whole package. I think right now we're going to start with policies and minutes. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Meetings.
Meetings, I'm sorry. Policies
Which
and
includes the minutes.
which includes minutes.
So is that like where somebody can go click, well, we're having a live meeting or something, or can they go back and replay a meeting, or?
So they'll still be able to go to YouTube and replay our live meetings, but they can go and look at our minutes and documents from the Assembly page.
Right, but this one says meetings, I guess $9,100. So what do we get for that?
That package includes all of the preparatory work that's done to put your meeting packages together. Right now, between what Ms. Yoder has to do and Ms. Smith has to do, and then what Marcia does in my office on the minutes end, it's quite complicated to get everything in that Google folder that you guys use to access documents. This should be much easier for everyone to put information in there for board members. And then some information will be available to the public as well. So there'll be a private side to it and a public side to it.
All right, so that's what I was going to ask. So there is a private side in case we have like an,
For communication between the board and.
or if we have like an expulsion hearing or something.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, that would not all be public.
Okay.
Are you gonna load in historical, or are you just gonna start one day and just start?
Right now, my understanding is you're starting one day and just starting.
That's
my
correct.
understanding.
That's correct.
I would love to see that, Ms. Rucker, to go back in historical and put it in. I don't know how feasible that will be, and we might just want to start. I don't want to put
It's not feasible.
I'll put a whole lot of work on these ladies, but we can start putting it in and then go from there. We can, but I mean, it would. I mean, for me,
Then you could go search on a word, right, and it'd pull up every
Correct.
reference to it. Or whatever.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. So that may be something that we can look at as a project, or maybe get some additional help, support to get some of that put in.
We're going to need a whole heaping lot of support to go back and put all that in there.
Well, and then you don't have to go all the way back. I mean, so do you go back, or do you go to specific key board meetings that had specific key things? I mean, so, but yeah, going back would be a challenge for sure.
And
Manpower.
part of that $9,100 fee, Mr. Brooks, includes AASB takes your policy manual, and they do that piece to the puzzle that we need for ADA compliance. That's not something your staff has to do. So they actually load all your policies and create that ADA compliant policy piece.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item G, I recommend approval of the contracts for services as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of contracts for services as attached. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item H, I hereby recommend that the employment of employee number 1, a non-tenured bus driver at Sparkman Middle, be terminated effective 17 days from the date notice of termination is issued.
Motion.
Second?
A motion and a second for the recommendation of termination of employee number 1, a non-tenured bus driver at Sparkman Middle School, to be terminated effective 17 days from the date notice of termination is issued. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item I recommend approval of the personnel items, Addendum 1 and Addendum 2, with an adjustment in the start date from August the 29th to August the 22nd, as submitted.
Motion.
Second?
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation approval of a personnel items, Addendum 1 and Addendum 2. Addendum 2 with a start date. It's currently listed as August 29th, 2022. We'll make that start date August 22nd, 2022. Any discussion? So if you want to look at Addendum 2, just to see it on that page, you'll see a start date of the 29th for this individual, and that would change to August the 22nd. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item J, I recommend approval of the supplemental contracts and discontinued contracts as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of supplemental contracts and discontinuance of supplemental contracts as submitted. Any discussion?
I make a motion, we go into executive session. On good name and character.
Okay.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to go into executive session to discuss administrative item J, supplements and discontinuance of supplements. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're going to recess into executive session.